Mr. Wambua, thank you so much for coming on the show. We're going to get straight into it.
Awesome.
Would you mind sharing how you came to your faith in Christ?
Yes, it was 1998. I had just completed my first semester in college. I grew up in Kenya. And, when you go to college, there's quite a bit of influence. Sometimes it's not very good influence. Now, just to give you some kind of background, I grew up in church. So I used to go to church. My mother took us to church, but I wasn't really born again. So I was serving in church, in the youth, singing, doing all regular stuff. But when I went to college, I saw what, the kids were doing, drinking quite a bit. And I was like, let me try this thing. And I tried it. It didn't feel right. After the first semester, I came to Nairobi, which was the capital city, and with a few friends, and we had a few drinks, and I went to my room, the hotel room, and I was like, it doesn't really sit right. So I decided to become born again, and I got on my knees, prayed for myself, and that's how I got born again. And then I got home. Of course, I went to the village, and when I went to church, I announced that, I just become a born-again Christian. And they looked at me and they were like, we thought we were a born-again Christian. So I had to tell them the story that the whole time, I wasn't necessarily faking it, but I was a church goer, but not a Christian.
How old were you at that time?
At that time, I was 20 years old, yes.
So you became a Christian after drinking some alcohol.
Yeah, exactly. To drink some alcohol. It didn't sit with me. And again, where I come from, I had seen alcohol destroying people's lives and families as well. So part of it was fear of what it can do to me, but also I didn't really enjoy it. First off, beer and alcohol, it's bitter when you taste it. So I didn't understand why people enjoy it. But there was a conviction because you are serving in church, you know who God is, and I felt like I'm living two lives. And I couldn't get myself to go home and get people to sing. And it didn't sit right with me. So I just prayed, and I believed that God heard me and forgave my sins. And that's how I became a Christian.
Wow, that's an amazing story. Yeah. It's just amazing to hear how God can work in so many different ways. It's not the typical, it's not typical at every single time, right? Every time is usually pretty different. And I think that's so amazing. So how did you? So you were born in Kenya.
Yes.
When did you come to the United States?
I came to the U.S. In January of 2007. Basically the first of the New Year's. That's when I landed in the U.S. So I've been around for 17 years. It's going to be 17 years in December.
So how old were you when you came over to the United States?
Man, do I even remember? I just know that I had been out of college for 3 years and I didn't have money, so I wanted to come to the U.S. and try to find some opportunities. So
that's why you came to the United States?
Yes. Just to give you a little bit of background, I grew up in a village and we didn't have a lot of resources. I have 4 brothers, 2 sisters. My father left the family when I was 9 years old. And my father had relatively, good money. He used to work for the government. So that meant my mother had to take care of us, all 7 kids. She didn't know how to read or write, so she couldn't get a professional job. And, growing up in the village, I saw my mother working in people's farms so she could feed us, doing really tough jobs, construction-like jobs. And when I was 10, 11, that's when I was introduced to doing the same thing as well. So we would wake up at 5 in the morning, go work in people's farms, come back, kind of wash our feet. That's what we called it. Take a shower, go to school, then get off school and go to the farm. We never even used to come home and do the same thing. And most likely, that's how we got to get food to eat, basically. You work in people's farms, then they give you some beans and corn to be able to cook. So sometimes we'll make dinner around 10 p.m. because that's the only time we get the food. So I always really wished that we had enough resources. So growing up, I was driven to make it work for us and my mother specifically. And that's why, through my mom's help and advice and motivation, I decided to do well in school because that's the only way I knew I could do well. So that's the reason I came to the US, because even after college, I got a job in Kenya. So I was getting paid relatively good money, but it was not enough because I was helping my brothers to go to school. Basically, I was paying for their school, helping my mother. So I would get paid like today, and then the following day I'm broke. And then someone told me, the US has a lot of opportunities and you can get a chance to go there. And that's how I decided to come to the US. So basically was to, yes, do my master's degree, but mostly to make some more money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Are you the oldest?
No, I'm the fifth.
Wow.
I'm the fifth in my family. It's,
fifth out of how many again?
7.
Wow.
So, and for some reason, and people think I'm the firstborn, even when I was growing up in Kenya. So, just to give you a perspective, I have 2 older sisters. They are the oldest. Then I have 2 older brothers. Our firstborn brother, basically my older brother, he's very introverted, very quiet. Basically, he hides from people. And growing up, because I'm a people person, they thought I was the firstborn. And then his first son, my nephew, who is named after my dad, when he was young, I would get home and get him on a bike, and then we just ride around the neighborhood and saying hi to everyone. And some people would be like, "Oh yeah, I see your dad came." Then I would tell them, "No, that's not my kid. That's my brother's kid." Yeah. So I'm the fifth in the family.
You had a lot of hardship growing up.
Yeah. You know what? It's by God's grace. Let me just say that. And I was sharing this with someone the other day, and because I do speaking, and someone advised me when I was starting out. They said, "Isaac, I know you're a Christian and you're a person of faith. That Jesus thing, don't talk about it too much when you get on stage, because you never know who is there." And I said, that's the reason I need to talk about it, because you never know who is there. And it was part of that holding back. But initially, I wasn't very sure whether I should talk about my faith, but the moment I started to talk about my faith, it was because people were asking me about my story. Who are you? How did you become who you are? And what I was sharing with someone last week is that I can't tell my story without talking about my faith. They are so intertwined. So it's by God's grace that I've been able to be who I am today. But it was tough. Really, it was just a question of surviving. First off, you need food to eat. And the other thing that happened, again, looking back, which some people, and I call them my fellow church people, sometimes we don't do a very good job, being able to notice someone who is struggling and helping them out. So we were made fun of. My dad left when I was 9. People would tell us, your dad left because he didn't love you, or he left because he didn't love your mother. I'm 5'4". That's how tall I am, really. That's 5'4" short. But people reminded me every single day that you are too short. So I thought being short is a disability. And again, when you're a teenager, you're trying to find yourself. So it was the challenges of not having enough resources. That was enough problem. But when people come after you, and especially when you're good in school, I don't know about you, but my mother told me the only ticket to get out of the village and be able to live a good life is to stick in school. So I did so well, which means I was beating kids from relatively rich families, and they hated me for that. Like, when someone, and it's not about, in America, people, they kind of talk behind your back. In Africa, they just talk right to your face.
I prefer that, actually.
No, they just look at you, and I'm like, wow. And it was just one thing after the other. But looking back, honestly, it was meant to be. In retrospect, if I was to go back, and I wouldn't change anything. It helped me to become who I am today. A person of faith, someone who cares about people. But I also learned so many lessons. But I think the most valuable thing that happened to me is that I never worried too much about small problems. Let me just say that. I went through so much. So, it's like, hey, I don't have gas for my car, so what? I'll walk. Or I'll go work at McDonald's or somewhere and make some money. Like, I can stay very grounded because I went through all that. So I believe it was meant to be.
And have your siblings come with you to the United States?
No, they have not been able to come. So our youngest, the last born, we've tried to have him come to the U.S., but there's a process. So we've never been able to succeed to do that. My other siblings, of course, my 2 sisters are married. My 2 older brothers are married as well. So they have families. They don't want to leave their families. And again, life in the U.S. can be a little bit tough. So for you to move your family from one country to another, it takes a while. It's expensive to settle down. So they decided to live in Kenya. So it's only me here and my wife and 2 kids.
How's that feel? Like, how's that experience been?
Initially it was tough because, again, in Kenya where I grew up, it's a very community-oriented environment whereby, you wake up and you have like 10 neighbors that you're talking to. So the first 3-4 years were tough for me, and especially since my mom was there and my younger brothers who, to an extent, were more like my kids. So I took them through school, trying to make sure they do the right stuff. So when I was here, I would miss my brothers and my mom as well. But with the time, it's become easier. Part of it is because of technology. If you want to talk to someone on a video phone, you can do that as well. So, yeah.
Wow. I have to ask this. So with all the things you've gone through and coming to America, especially if you compare Kenya to America, do you ever get tired of hearing people complain about little things?
Yeah, I get tired, but also get surprised. Honestly, I'm not used to people complaining about stuff. It's the littlest things.
Because you're 10 years old working on the farm,
yeah.
And you're concerned about what are you going to eat tonight, and then we got people complaining about things that are not even compared.
Yeah, it's part of it is they're under pressure to either to complain because everyone else is complaining. Perspective is another thing as well. But there's another factor, and this is just from my observation. There's a lot of laziness that I get to see in America. And when someone is lazy, and what I mean is not doing what you are supposed to do when you are supposed to do it, it means you don't get the results that you either expect or your employer expects or the society expects, because all of us, we are supposed to make a contribution in this world. When you don't get the results, actually you get frustrated. You look back and you go like, what's wrong with me? And for you to defend yourself, one of the easiest ways is to complain. Because when you are complaining, basically you're from a physics perspective, you create a very interesting field around yourself, a very negative thing, and nobody wants to be close to to that negative field.
That's great. I love that. I never thought about that.
It's a defense mechanism, It's like if you ask someone a question and then they just go like, dude, what's wrong? What's going on? So people, when they complain, they know you, first off, as a Christian, you are likely to slow down and ask them what's going on. So you're going to give them attention. And even though what they are complaining about is not such a big thing, they might say, my life is coming to an end. I don't know what's going on. Even some Christians, they complain. And with all the perspective, they'll say, I feel like the devil is coming after me. I'm like, okay, he's been coming after you for 10 years. You need to know how to pray the devil out of your environment, And sometimes, the devil, of course, he comes after us, but sometimes we blame him for things that we potentially have control over.
Yeah.
Someone not showing up to work on time, not working on their projects, not doing their job, and then they blame it on the devil, that's laziness. So, yes, I get tired of people complaining, but now it's become more like fun because I just want to see how far they can go. And I never tell them, hey, thank God you are not in Africa. The question is, so what are you going to do about it? Because I'm still responsible for my life. I'm responsible for my results. I have 2 kids and a wife. Okay, yes. I'm responsible to provide and protect them. I'm responsible to show up to this interview. And I can have all kinds of excuses, but at the end of the day, I did not do it. I didn't get the results. So basically I failed. Yeah.
So so you're saying the work ethic in Kenya is higher in general than in America?
It is. Now we have some lazy people in Kenya too. Trust me. We have them. And just to tell you something, and there's a way God sets you up for something. And I believe that every path that God helps us to walk through, it's meant to lead you to greatness. Growing up in Kenya, in that village, I was so driven. Really, my dream was to get out of the village from that environment. And then I learned about high school. I imagined being in high school, a boarding high school, whereby I was going to interact with people from relatively well-off families and people that could speak English very well, because in the village, our teachers, most of them did not graduate high school, so they couldn't even communicate very well. So that was my dream. And that means I got so focused, which means I never wasted time. I was labeled as the the short guy who walks fast. I still walk fast. And even in my family, when we are having like lunch or dinner, I would eat very fast and go do other things. And my sister used to say, why are you always in a hurry? Okay. My dad would say the same thing as well. But when I came to America, I figured this is where I belong because things are structured. You got to get results. You get paid. You get compensated. You get rewarded for results. So somehow, the problems in Kenya molded me to be who I am. But also at some point, I felt like I didn't belong because I was so driven, but other people were a little bit, lazy or relaxed. By the way, there's a term we use in Africa. They say there's no hurry in Africa. So people can just wake up sometimes and they talk about what are we going to have for breakfast for 2 hours. And then after breakfast, they discuss what are we going to have for lunch. And then after that, let's take a nap. And you go like, well, I'm like, why do you need to eat when you haven't done anything, So,
that was probably hard for you to deal with, and with your personality.
Yeah, it was hard. And right now, some of them I've forgotten when I go to Kenya because I go there to visit. By the way, my wife and I and our kids, we are going to Kenya this coming December for Christmas, and we are looking forward to it. We always have a good time. So every time I go to Kenya, they tell me I'm too Americanized.
Why is that? What's different about you?
Because if we have an appointment, you better show up on time. Otherwise,
but they don't. I heard that in Africa, that's not a rule.
Oh, no, it's not. Actually, it happened with my family. I went to Kenya in 2021, December, and we had a huge family reunion. Basically, my dad, after he left their family, he got married to my stepmom, so he had a second wife. Yeah, and they have 6 kids and all daughters, and they had kids and my sisters. So we decided to do a huge family reunion, my stepmom's side and my side. So we had over 200 people in our home for that reunion. And so at some point we said, let's have a meeting, just the siblings, my sisters and I and my stepsisters. And we were supposed to meet at 2:30 p.m. I had given someone else an appointment to go visit them. And then 2:30 came, they were not there. And I was like, where are they at? They were like, they're going to be here at some point. 45 minutes later, I was stressing out. They showed up and they said, let's make some tea before we start talking. And I'm like, you guys are already late. And they said, you're too Americanized. So basically, I had to leave the meeting and go to the next one. So I'm being reminded that I need to slow down a little bit, being more relaxed. So it's family. There's nothing much you can do about the family. But it's not a rule to do things on time. And part of it's a cultural thing.
Yeah.
And there's a good side of that. You don't always be on the go. But there's a downside of that, because you build those bad habits where you never do anything on time. You never follow through on anything. You're never in a hurry. And that affects, how much you produce. It affects the economy as well. So that's a downside. Yeah.
Is it Dynamo Methods?
Dynamo Methods.
How did that get started?
So Dynamo Methods, the business that I run, I've always had a passion for people, and that, of course, was nurtured when I was growing up. I figured I'm more of a people person, and but when I went to high school, I was advised by the career advisor that I need to do engineering, because they looked at my strengths. They said, okay, you're good with communication, but you're also good in sciences. And they said engineers get paid very well, medical doctors get paid very well. I think they said lawyers and business people. They said, but so I chose to become an engineer. But that was just a career path. But when I came to the US, I figured there's so many other options that you can have when it comes to a career. And at some point I had to look, to go back and ask myself, if money and time was not a problem, what would I want to do? And at that point, it was interesting. 2012, I sat down in my apartment and I had a notebook and a pen, and I couldn't come up with anything. And I was like, man, I thought I was smart enough to figure these things out. I couldn't. All I could come up with was, I would like to do something to do with people. Like I like being around people. So anyway, 2 years later, I decided to start a business, Dynamo Methods, which was a consulting company to help streamline processes and systems. Then I included training and speaking several years later. So it was born out of a passion. I went back to when I was in 6th grade, and I figured that time I was the kid who used to tell people stories. I like to have people around me, and I figured in America I can do the same thing. Telling stories about inspiration, transformation, empowerment, but also give them the resources that they need. So initially, I just wanted to do consulting for small companies to help them grow. Then I figured, to get a bigger platform, I needed to have a training program. So I got certified as a trainer, speaker, and as a coach, and then speaking came afterwards. But Dynamo Methods, really the name itself, comes from an experience I had when I was in 5th grade. So my sister got married when she was very young, and she's the one who took care of me. Basically, she took me in because in our family we were so poor. We couldn't afford even to have food most of the times. So she took me in when I was in 5th grade, so she could make sure at least I have enough food. I had food to eat before I went to school. And when I was staying with her, the husband bought me a bicycle, a regular mechanical bicycle. And that bicycle is the one where basically there are now gears, very mechanical. And the bicycle had a little gadget called Dynamo, which is a mechanical, it's a mechanical generator whereby you attach to the tire, and then as the tire spins, it produces the power, then it illuminates the light through the headlights. So when I decided to start a business, I was like, okay, I believe in finding solutions from within yourself. And it took me back to this little dynamo, which is it's very small, but it has those coils. It produces power from within itself. And the faster you pedal, the faster you move, the more light it produces. So Dynamo is based on the principle that says that the solution is always found from within yourself. And if you work hard, either you move fast or you are intense enough, you can always get better results. So that's the logic behind the Dynamo Methods.
And you said you got certified. You did the Maxwell?
Yes, I got certified. My first certification was through Maxwell Leadership. That was in 2015. And since then, I've had several others, but mostly to be able to access the resources, especially for corporate training.
How was that certification?
It was great. Let me just say that. Of course, you pay the money, you get registered, then you go through some materials on your own, and then we've been going to Orlando. They have done that, historically for so many years, and you get officially certified, basically. And then, you're on your own. It's like a diploma. You gotta go get out there and make, work on it. But the certification is important, but the most valuable thing is from the training and the mentorship that you get. Because they don't just leave you dry. After you get certified, you get plugged into some mentorship programs and weekly calls. Basically, every single day, there's a call that's being hosted by one of the faculty members, and that's why I'm still within that environment. Because and they have different levels. You start out with a basic certification. There's the mentorship level, and they have what they call the executive leader level, which you pay some extra money to be there, but it also gives you more resources and a higher level of mentorship. And I'm one of the executive leaders, basically, with the association. It's been a big blessing. Let me just say that a huge blessing. And actually, just 2 months ago, I just became one of the faculty members with a small segment within the Maxwell Leadership. So that's a big blessing.
I'm guessing you first heard about it just from reading one of his books.
Yes, I did. And it's interesting because also when I was in college, a friend of mine called Jimmy came from a very good family. The dad was a teacher, the mom was a teacher, great parents, and he was introduced to personal development. So he had all kinds of books in college, and he's the one who gave me one of the books, and I read it. It's actually a small book, a collection of quotes, and it was called Distilled Wisdom. And I read it, and I was like, this stuff is good. Then he gave me another book by Miles Monroe, the late. I read that book, and then, I got hooked. So I started buying books. And the first John Maxwell book that I bought was called The Winning Attitude, a very small book. And I read that book, I memorized it, and I didn't know who he was. I was just reading a book. Then I came to the US and I came across a book called The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership.
That's the popular one.
Yeah, that's the one that hooked me. And I bought it at Kinko's. Remember Kinko's?
Yes, yeah, I do.
Bought it at Kinko's and The 7 Habits and several other books. So So several years later, when I was looking for a certification program, actually a friend of mine who is highly successful in business is the one who told me, this is a very good program, you need to look into it. And he was also a speaker. I was starting out. Actually, how we met, I was speaking at a youth conference, and I was the speaker before him. He was the main speaker, and that's how we got connected. And he told me, Isaac, you have a gift. I think you can nurture it. You need to get certified. So that's how I got into Maxwell Leadership. Yeah.
Just last quick question about that. Is the curriculum based on the books? Is that kind of how it works?
Yes, some of them. Not, he has written over 100 books. So there are some core books that have the curriculum based on. So the basic certification is purely based on the books. Then the mentorship has people that have successfully run businesses. So there's additional books that Maxwell has written, but these professionals like you have your book, you have your content, you come in and we get access to that. And then on the executive level, it's the same thing as well. So the most valuable thing is being trained on how to sell by someone who has sold, who has run a successful business, or the lady who is in charge of the whole coaching lane of the business, basically the faculty. She has written 13 books, and she has her own coaching, institute and practice as well. So this is someone who is practicing, and that's the most valuable thing. So the Maxwell programs are good, but you find they realized at some point they're going to be tapped, and that's how they were able to bring other people as well.
So they bring in successful business owners that you get to tap into.
Exactly. Actually, we were talking about Patrick Lencioni. He's one of them. One of his programs, the Working Genius. We just got access to it this year. He spoke at our conference in March this year. And then, so they bring these really successful people. Then if they are a good fit, then they become part of the faculty, and we are able to access those resources. There's a guy who is a great Christian, Tim Elmore, probably not him. We also have access to his resources. Actually, he used to work for John Maxwell, then he branched out and he started his own, coaching and training company, but he's also a great guy. I've had him speak several times, even outside of the Maxwell environment.
Did you read The Working Genius?
Oh, yes.
So which ones are you?
I
think one of them is like Dreamer.
There's Inventor.
Inventor, yeah.
Mine is Governizer.
Okay. Are you the guy who takes it to the end?
Yeah, I'm the guy who takes it to the end. But also, so Governizer, I can, exactly. There's a term they use, yes. The guy who finishes the project.
Yes. I was thinking that you're that guy. I need you because I'm not that guy.
Oh, no, I am.
I'm a starter.
Yeah, no.
I'm more of a dreamer, a starter.
Mm-hmm.
But the other one, I can't remember what it was, but basically you're rallying the people around the idea.
Governizer.
That's probably you.
That's the Governizer, yeah. I can rally people behind a cause, but I can also push it all the way to the end. Yeah, so and part of it, I don't know, rallying people behind, that's my strength. I can easily, get people to see the vision, but be able to push it all the way to the end. I think that came from my experience growing up, whereby if you don't finish anything, basically you don't get what you want. Right. Not really what you want, it's what you need. Mm-hmm. Because going back to my experience with my mother, with us working in people's farms, and looking back, I don't understand why they did that, but most of the people that we worked for, sometimes they wouldn't pay us. That would work all day, and then they say, "Oh, we don't have money, so we'll pay you tomorrow." And that's the money we were counting on to buy food. Or sometimes they would give us just corn and beans, and those they take like 2 hours to cook. Now remember, in Kenya we don't have pressure cookers. Okay, you're using firewood. So
no electricity.
No electricity where I grew up. So they took 2 hours to cook that food, and you can imagine it's 8 p.m. By the time you get home, it's 9, and you eat at midnight. It was just horrible.
You wake up early again.
You wake up early again. So I learned how to finish so I can get what I need, and that was a good thing as well. But I've also learned to ask, basically to set upfront expectations. Okay,
yes.
What are we trying to get here? How is it going to look like? When we're done. I was coaching someone yesterday. I do executive coaching, and one of my clients was having a little bit of a difficult time with a meeting that they had with other executives. and they had an agenda, 3 major items, and then almost every other executive kind of deviated to other things as well. And he was trying to bring them back in, and it didn't work. So he was so frustrated, and he said, I feel like my opinion doesn't matter and stuff. And actually I told him, what I shared with him, I said, one of the things that might help you is to set those expectations in the beginning and say, I know we have 3 agenda items. What are we trying to accomplish? What needs to happen at the end of this meeting for us to feel it was successful? That makes it easy for you to bring them back when someone starts to deviate, because you say, it looks like we only have 20 minutes. Can we get back so we can accomplish this? It's a very small thing, but it tends to help. So really being able to push things to the end, I believe it was from my upbringing.